Good morning, everyone. I'm going to jump in and get started in today's stream. Hope everyone's doing well. So, with today's video, we're going to pick up where we left off with the Fullstack CRUD application using nextjs on the front end, mongoose, and mongodb. Just to do a quick recap, what we currently have is the ability to create, update, and delete columns, and each column will eventually hold a task that we want to complete, and we'll add drag and drop authentication and all that good stuff. But for right now, we have a fully functional CRUD app where we can create a column, and we'll demonstrate it now. We'll click new. We get an automatic update of the column within the project. We're not using any client side files as of right now. What's allowing that to happen is using revalidate path from nextjs. And because we have it automatically being revalidated from the server, we get a almost instant or real-time update feel, if you will, with the project. We also have the ability to delete a column. So if we click the delete button, we'll notice that the column immediately goes away. We also have the ability to update columns. So if I click next to the text of updated and we type in new up and click the update button, we don't have any toast notifications or anything to indicate that it successfully took. But if we reload the page, we notice that it now reads new up. And if I go into the database itself, and as I mentioned, we're using mongodb to persist the data. We'll give it just a moment. Refresh it again. Figure we needed to log back in. Go to the table, and we see that the column is stored within the database with the new name that we just updated it to be. So with this video, I think what I want to do is go ahead and add in the ability to add tasks to each column. And we'll start with the ability to create and delete, and then eventually add, update, and get. So let's just go ahead and work on that now. First place I like to start with these is with the back end itself before we build out any of the user interface. That way we have the data structured and organized properly. And then from there, we can always add what makes or what brings the project to life, if you will. So we'll start with the server actions, which is the way that we're communicating with the database. We're not using traditional APIs. Everything is going to be rendered from the server until we want to add more client-side activity. So the first thing we'll need to do is organize what a task looks like. So we'll head over to our models, which is located in the lib directory, and we'll just add a file named task model.ts. So within this file, this is where we're going to store the structure of our task, which will give us the ability to add a task to a specific column. So we'll begin by importing mongoose, and we want to get access to document, schema, and types. Then we'll create the export interface, which will be initially, this one will be for the backend, just to make sure that we are capturing everything accurately. And with this, we want a title, which will be a string. I'm gonna add created at, which will be using the date object. And then we'll also need the column because each task is going to be associated with a column. So we'll add the types of object ID for this because we want to store a task to the column, and the way that relationship will work is each task will have to have a specific column in order for it to be within the project. So that's perfect. Now we'll need to add the front end interface. We'll go export interface. We'll name this iTask. We want a ID, which will be a string, a title, which will be a string, the column, which is going to be the ID itself, that will be stored as a string, and we'll also have created at, which will be stored as a string. So this export interface is for the server, the back end, which is it's going to be looking for the object ID. And then this interface is for the front end, which is just looking for the actual type itself, not necessarily where we're getting it from. Yes, I'm back days, man. Yep, days, good stuff. I agree. Thank you for the support. It is always appreciated, my friend. So now let's go ahead and build out the actual schema. We'll go const task schema. So it'll be equal to new schema, and we'll pass in the I task document. This will have a title. The type will be a string, and this is required in order to create a title or a task. We then need a column. Of course, this type will be a string, and this should ask capital. No. The type for our column will be schema types dot object ID. We want to reference the column model. And of course, as we mentioned, this is going to be required. So we'll set required at true. And then outside of the two curly braces, but still within the schema, we're going to capture the timestamps. This will be created at, we want it to be set to true, and then updated at, we'll set to false. Oh, see what I did. So to capture the timestamps, we'll need the curly braces, and we'll go time stamps created at true, and it will include updated at. We don't necessarily need to capture that. All right. And with the schema task model basically built out, we need to export it so that we can access it throughout the project. So go export const, and we're just going to name this task, and we'll set it equal to mongoose.models.task. And if it doesn't exist, we'll need to care for that as well. So we'll go mongoose model, pass in the iTask document, and this takes two parameters. The first one will be task, and the second one will be task schema. All right, so that's basically all that we need in order to build out our task model. We're importing Mongoose. We're using document, schema, and types in order to help create the relationship. The first interface is going to be defining what it will look like on our back end. The second is going to be for the front end. And this is the task model that we're creating. We're saying that we want a title with a type of string, and it needs to be a required field. We also want access to the column, which will be an object, because the type of it will be the schema.types.object ID. It's going to be looking for this column ID. We're going to be referencing the column model, and this is required, so this is set to true. And then for the timestamps, we're just going to capture the created timestamp, and we're not necessarily worried about updated. And then from there, we're exporting a const named task to allow us to use this model throughout the project. So that's perfect. So the next step will be to create the backend functionality so that we can create a task inside of the column model. So in order to do that, we'll need to create a action, since we're not doing any front end API, any back end APIs. So we'll go to the actions.ts file that's located within the lib directory. And underneath the delete column, we'll create or add a comment of create task. Yep, we got a later afternoon, so we're a little earlier than normal today, but you could expect a little more frequency of content. But I appreciate the support and the acknowledgement and holding me accountable. I love it. All right, so within this file, we'll need a function that we can leverage in order to create a task. So we'll follow the same syntax format of export async function, and this is going to be named create task. This function is going to take in form data, and we'll be using the form data object. We'll start by establishing the connection to MongoDB. So we'll go await DB connect, and then we'll say we'll need to capture some information from the actual form, destructure it, So we'll go const title. It's going to be equal to form data dot get, and we're looking for the title, and that will be stored as a string. And with this as well, we just want to make sure we don't get any white spaces or any blank bad data. We'll also need to get the column ID from the form, and that's going to be equal to form data dot get column ID, and we'll add as string with this. We'll need to make sure that we're validating that we get the data first. So we'll say if there's no title or there's no column ID, we're going to throw a new error just stating that invalid task input. Just some simple validation. And in the event everything flows through successfully, we'll say await task, which is leveraging the task model that we haven't imported just yet, but with IntelliSense from VS Code, it's making the correct suggestion of /task model, which is located one directory or one folder, one file, outside of this specific file. So we'll just go ahead and click enter. And as you can see, it is now imported. So we'll go task dot create. Remember, that is a method from Mongoose, several of them. And we'll say we want to create a title and a column, which will be set to the column ID. And this is going to satisfy the fields within the task model. Remember, we had two title column, and the time will be cared for by MongoDB. So that's the cool part about that. So this is all that we need to create a task, the title and the column ID. And then if everything flows through successfully, we want to leverage revalidate path to revalidate the data on the server, just to make sure that we're getting the most up-to-date information. And with that, we can go ahead and click save. So now we need to use this create task function within the actual page itself in order to create a task. So I think what we'll do now is maybe just bring in the front end so that we can see this as we bring it all together and talk through it as it's built out. So give me just a second. All right, so let's go ahead and see how we want to design this. So I think currently what we have is the columns just listed in a little flex row, but we may need to style this a little differently so that we can see it a little better as we begin to have the ability to create and update. So let's just work on the overall layout of this just a little bit so that we have a better feel for what exactly we're seeing on screen. So I'm going to comment out this section, and we no longer see it on screen. And we'll create a section where we are going to display the columns within a specific layout. So we'll give the section a class name of grid and go grid columns. I'm going to set it to 1 on small devices, and medium, we'll give it grid columns 3 and a gap of 2. So within this section, I want to have the columns in a grid layout, and within each column you can add tasks and also make changes to the column if need be. So we're not going to copy this, we'll retype it. We'll go columns dot map, and this columns is coming from the function that we created in the prior video to get all columns. We're just leveraging this column and going to map over each one that we have. So we will go columns.map. For each column, we're going to name it call, C-O-L, but you can name it whatever you want. And from a TypeScript perspective, I'm just going to set it to any. And then for each column, we want to render something on screen. So we're going to place everything in a div. And of course, we need to give it a key. That will be call underscore ID. So with the column, we'll just have it as a square, maybe around the borders, but the top portion will be where we can update the title and delete the column itself. And then within the column at the bottom, we'll have the ability to add a task, and then we'll see the columns, the task within the specific column. So we'll start with what we'll refer to as a header, which is basically where we have the ability to create and excuse me, where we'll have the ability to update the column and delete it. And our column. This will need give it a class name of flex. We'll set the items to be centered, and then we'll go justify between for the two items, or for the three items, excuse me. So the first is going to be a H2 that's going to hold the actual column title. We'll call .title, and we see those listed there. And then underneath the H2, this is where we're going to need the ability to update and delete. And remember that it's stored in a form. And I could probably just copy this and replace it. So we see delete listed there. And then we'll also need the ability to update the column. So we'll go div, and we'll just place the same form. We'll just place the same update form that we had to keep it simple. Just grab this. So the column has delete, update. Actually, I'll just remove this. So I don't like the way that looks. So we're gonna change the layout a little bit. So underneath the closing form in the div, let's add a new div, and inside of it, actually we could just go with a form to be fine. Let's add a form, and this will have a input. This type will be hidden because this is where we're going to pass in the actual ID, and we don't necessarily need the user to see the ID. They don't necessarily care about that. So we'll give this a name of ID and a ID of ID. We'll set the default value to call dot underscore ID, and to make sure that it is working, I'll just remove this. That's working. Then we just need the input, which we probably should store that in a separate div. Last name of flex, and we'll set the item center for right now. We'll style it in a moment. Get something on screen, we'll give this a input with a name of title. The default value will be call.title, and we'll set to be fine for right now. That's all we need. Let's just add a button. We'll just go update. We'll go type submit. Let's see. So I think we got a little bit of redundancy here, clearly. And I don't think we necessarily need to have, or should we? Let's style this so we can see what it looks like a little better, and we'll make some changes to it. So for this div, I'm going to give it a class name, and we'll go border rounded, padding of 3, and give it space on the Y of 3. Having some issues with my local host, and I think it's some privacy settings with my browser. So I'm gonna go on a private browser for a second. Let's change this out. There. All right, I can see that a lot better. All right, make sure this thing is neutral 200. 1 second. I don't know if you have any issues with seeing that, but it should be good. All right. So with that, we have the column, we have delete. I probably should move update to the column itself versus where it is currently located. So let's change that a little bit. Go to the column itself. It's H2. We'll give this a class name just to give it make it a little more pronounced. We'll make the font semi-bold and make the text small. So we have the H2 for the title, and we have the form to delete. Make sure this works. No, it's passing the action. This one is update column. Let's make sure this works. So it is still updating. Just need to update the position of it so that it is a little more aligned than what it is right now. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's do this. I think I will copy this. Let's remove it. Let's add another div. Let's give this one a class name. I think, actually, you know what? I'll leave that one there, and we'll capture this one, and we'll just relocate this to be inside of, see what this form would look like. There we go. All right, so how do we want this to appear? Because we have the title, the header, and the delete button, but I want the edit button right here. So I think, give me a second, let me think about this one. You know what? I'm gonna do this. Let me change this up a little bit. I think I will move this one, get rid of this. And let's add the form to update the column here. So we'll go action, update column. We'll pass in the input with the type of hidden, ID of ID, and a name of ID. We'll set the default value to call dot underscore ID. Click save. That makes sense that we don't see anything. And then the next input we will have will be for the actual title itself. So we'll give this a default value of call.title, and we'll give this a name of title and a ID of title. And so now we can add a button to date the column. Let's make sure button update, and we'll give this a type of submit. Perfect. And then now I think underneath this form, we'll just add another form and pass back in the delete option. So underneath this form, I'm just going to copy this because it's going to be the exact same thing. I just want to make sure that it aligns properly. So we're not bad. We'll go just flex, center, justify between, and we just need to make sure that it's instead of justify between, let's go space between. Do I need to make this a flat column? Yeah, we'll keep this as is. Set the width to, let's set the width to 24. I think I'm going to use, let's change this up a little bit because it's not quite turning out the way I intended to. But most importantly, let's make sure that it works. All right, that's fine. Now let's go ahead and just make sure that we have the ability to create a title. And I'll worry about the styling of this in just a second. But let's focus on creating the task, which is what we ultimately were trying to get accomplished anyway. I'll fix the styling later. So underneath this div, let's add another div, and we just want the ability to create a task. So we'll go form. Can't remember if I already brought it in. I haven't just yet. So it's in the same file. Let's go ahead and import that function. We named it create task. And then now inside of this div, inside of this form, we'll add a action, and we'll just name this action create task. We know we'll need to pass a couple things in. The first is a ID. So we'll just give this a ID of column ID, a name of column ID, and a default value of column underscore ID. And we see it is working. We see the column ID listed there. Let's just go ahead and set the type to hidden so we can't see it. Perfect. The next thing we need in order to create a task is the actual input itself. So we'll go input. This will have a type of text, a name of title. We'll give this a placeholder of title. We'll add the field of required, and I think we'll also need a button that will represent the submission of the task. So we'll just go add task, and this will have a type of submit. So let's just test this out to see if it's working. I'm gonna click on the title placeholder to get access to the input, and we'll just name this new task. We'll click add. So we don't see anything. It is closed out. Let's launch the database. I'm currently in a different browser, so I'll need to bring MongoDB back up. Give me just a moment. We're getting logged in, and we'll go to browse collections. What we should see is a column in the table of columns and tasks, which we do. And if we click on task down at the bottom here, we do see we have a new task. Man, not a very responsive view, but that's okay. If I just scroll over and click on title, let's make sure this is legit. Give me 1 second. And if we look inside of our table, we see we have the columns, field, or model, and task. If we click on task, it does read new task, and this object ID ends in DDF0. So to go back to columns just to make sure, DDF0, it is associated with the first column. So perfect. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and shift our focus back to updating the actual column so that we can see the task within each column. Perfect. So that is working just as we intended. So we'll go back to actions. And now we just want to create the get action so that we can get the columns, get the tasks for each column and present them within the actual column that it belongs to itself. So inside of actions, just going to add a comment just to keep everything a little organized. We'll go get task, by column. This will be a export async function that we will name, we'll just say get board, because ultimately these are probably considered boards. Maybe they're not, but for right now, it'll be get board, and we can always rename it later. Let's add the connection to the database first. We'll go db connect. And then of course, we want to capture some fields. The first is going to be columns, and that's going to be await column using the column model. And we'll go .find. This should be fine. I don't think we need anything else. I think .find gets it done. And then the next thing we need to do is get the task. And we'll go await task .find .sort. And the only reason I'm sorting this is for right now is so that we can see, we can have the most recent created in a certain position, and what's already been created would just, I don't want to say fall in line, but fall in line, if you will. So with this information, we should be able to return the columns back to the user in addition to the task. So this will be columns.json.parse. I'm sorry, columns, and we're setting that equal to json.parse, and we'll be passing in json.stringify. And what we'll be passing in is the actual columns. And then for the task, we'll go json.parse, json.stringify, and we're passing in the actual task. Helps if I add a comma there, get rid of that error. So perfect. What we just done was created a function named getBoard. All right, so what we did was create a function named getBoard, and it's asynchronous that will start by establishing a connection to the database. And then we want to capture and store the columns within the column const. And then we'll have a const named task. And we want to find the task and sort those based upon when they were created. And then we're basically just returning the actual column and task back to the user. So now we are ready to use this actual function within the page.tsx file so that we can see the task for each specific column. So what we'll do, just to keep it simple, I know knowing me, the layout is going to drive me crazy, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. We'll just go back to the page.tsx file. First thing we need to do is bring in that function. So it's going to be getBoard. And then inside of the const where we're destructuring columns, we could just go ahead and add getBoard to that destructuring, because it is coming from, we're going to redirect it to, actually, you know what? I'm not going to do that. What I'll do is I'm going to change this to getBoard, and then we'll go task from getBoard. That's right. So we're no longer going to point to the get columns function that we created before. Everything is now stored within the board itself. We can get the columns and the tasks from it. And just to make sure nothing breaks, I'm just gonna save it, refresh it. Everything is still there. So we're just getting everything from this one function versus having multiple imports with the same data. And as you can see, it works perfectly as we intend. Just gonna remove this. I no longer need it. Click save. And then we'll just come down to the column itself and just go ahead and add in the data for this specific column so that we can begin to display the actual task. So for simplicity purposes, I think what we'll do is, let me think about this for a second. Let's just go underneath this div. I think I can add a new div here. Let's just see what it looks like. No, that's not going to work. Let me think about this for a second. I think I'm gonna need to add one more function. All right, so let's create a function named task for column, and we'll need to pass in the column ID, and we'll just set this equal to a string for right now, and we'll just return the task that we captured from the get board. So we'll return task.filter, type will be any, and we'll go t.column. It's going to be equal to the column ID. Auto-filled it, perfect. All right, so now I think we can filter over this task by column since we're grabbing the task and we know that we need to pass a column ID. So we'll just go task by column here, or task for column, I think we named it. And this will be dot, no, because we're not mapping, we're just grabbing them all. So we'll go column dot underscore ID, then we'll go dot map task. The TypeScript will set it to any. Probably should be a little more exact, but it's okay. And then we'll go inside of this, we'll just pass in a div. First, we'll need a key of column dot underscore ID. Then we will pass the actual title inside of this. So we'll go call dot title. Okay. Let's see. We'll add one here. We'll go second title. Give me 1 second. I see what I did. I put column. And this should be task. What else did I miss with this one? I'll move this to here. Something function task for column. Alrighty. This looks good. So it seems the create is working, but we're not able, it's not displaying. Let's see, get in the board. That looks good. Try this again. Maybe task for the column, and we'll go call dot underscore ID. And with this, we want to map over all of those. And for each, we'll name it task, not any. And we'll div with a key. The key needs to be task dot underscore ID. Inside of this, we should be able to go task underscore ID. It is still not getting it. Huh. Let me see. What am I missing? Well, that looks good. Columns and tasks from get board. Yep. Oh, that looks good. Huh. Drawing blank. Well, sorry about that. All right, let's get back to it. So I probably should have did a try catch here so I can see what the error is, but we'll see if I can find it. So you want to get the column ID first. That is correct. And then from there, we want to map over each of the columns. Hey, give me a hard time today, I see. Let's see. Given the board, the column, the task, and the column. And just to keep me honest, that is what we named it, right? Maybe it's got to be something with the way I'm getting these columns. I think I'm grabbing it. Let's see something. Task filter, column ID. Try this again. Function, column ID. This is a string. returns to task filter. There it is. I got M. Let's update that. And as you can see, it is now showing the task ID. So a simple fat finger on my behalf, but now it is showing the ID. So we can change this to title. And if we click save, we now see that we have the task associated with each column. So this is the second title, it's the second task. And if I remember correctly, this is what we are seeing in the database as well. Perfect. So let's go ahead and add the ability to update and delete a task next. So the first place we'll start is with the server action itself so that we can have that functionality. And then from there, we'll focus on, after we add these, confirm their work, we'll shift the focus to having the ability to see these a little better than what they are laid out right now. I know it looks a little funky, but we'll fix it in just a moment. So first things first, let's add the ability to update the task. So we'll go export async function, update task. And of course, this is going to be taking form data, grabbing it from the form data object. So we'll go await db connect. We'll need two things. The first will be the ID, and we're going to get that from the form data. And we'll just use .get method, and we want to get the ID, and that will be as string. And then second, what we want is the constant name title. It will be form data.get. What we want to get is the title. And of course, this will be as string. I don't need, trying to find my cursor. Sorry about that. This is as string. Yep. And question mark dot trim. And it will say, for some simple validation, if no ID or no title, we'll throw a new error back to the user, just saying invalid task input. And if we get everything through successfully, we then want to await and update the task. So we'll go await, we'll grab the task model, and we'll use the find by ID and update method. And the first parameter will be the ID, the second will be the title. And if all goes well, only thing we need to do then is just revalidate the path. So let's go ahead and use the update task function that we just created. Very simple. It's asynchronous, of course. We're passing in the form data object. We'll begin by awaiting the connection to the database. And then from the form data, we're destructuring the ID first as a string. This will be the identifier to find the task. And the second will be the actual title. If we don't get an ID or title, we're going to throw an error back to the user. Otherwise, we're going to use the mongoose method of find by ID and update, which takes two parameters, the ID and what needs to be updated. And in this case, it's going to be the title. And if everything goes successfully, we're just going to revalidate the path. So we'll go back to the page.tsx, and let's go ahead and bring in this ability. So just as we did with the input, I'm just going to change out this title so that it is a form. This form needs a action. So let's go ahead and bring in that action, and that's going to be the action that we just created. So at the top, next to get board, we'll do update task, and we're grabbing that action from @lib/actions, which is the file that we just updated. And then we'll just pass in the update column function. First thing we need is the ID. So I'll go default value. It's going to be task._ID. Perfect. So we see it there. I'll give this a type of hidden. Name of this will be ID, and we'll give it an ID of ID. Save, and we no longer see anything. That's perfect. Excuse me. Underneath that input, we'll add a second input. This one is going to represent the actual title. So we'll give this a name of title, a default value of task.title. Click save. Perfect. And we'll worry about styling it later. That's it right there. And then underneath the input, it's still inside of the form, we'll just add a button, just name it update, and we'll give it a type of submit. So let's make sure this works as we intended. What we should do is be able to click on new task, the form, or excuse me, the input then begins to appear. And if we add something to the task and click update, notice we don't get any notification, but if we refresh the screen, oh, it's not taking. Let's see, what are we getting and why is it not taking? Find by ID, update task title, revalidate, that looks good. So inside of this, I got update column. No one told me that it was update column. It should be update task. Sorry about that. Now let's try it. There we go. And let's just check the database to be sure. I have a better view of it. Give me a second. There. All right, so we'll check the database, refresh it, and we see we have the additional S's, so that's perfect. All right, so we'll go back to our editor, and the next thing we want to do is add the ability to delete a task. So we'll go back to the action.ts file, and we'll add a note named delete task, and I forgot the E, and to add a note here, update task. We'll go export async function. I'll name this delete task. And of course, we need to pass in the form data. Begin by establishing the database connection. And then we'll go const ID because we need to get the ID from the form data. We'll go form data.get. We want to get is the ID, and that will be as a string. And we'll say if there's no ID, we'll throw a new error, task ID, and we'll just say invalid task. And then if everything goes well, we want to come outside of that one, sorry. We'll go await task, and we'll find this one by ID and delete, which is the mongoose method. Be sure to pass in the ID, and then we'll go path to revalidate the data. All right, and that basically takes care of that action. So all this is a function named delete task that will take form data. Once it gets the form data, it'll make a call to the database, establish that connection, destructure the ID from the form data, validate that we have an ID, and if we do, we'll review or query the task table, look for the appropriate task with the matching ID, use the find by ID mongoose method, and delete it. And then once it's done that, it'll revalidate the data so that there's no refreshes with the page. Work very similar to how we did with the column, kind of giving it a real-time feel, if you will. So now let's go ahead and use this in the page.tsx file. So we'll go at the top and we'll import delete task. And underneath this form, we basically can just add another form right here. We'll pass the action, move that up a little bit, the action of delete task, not model this time. Sorry about that from before. We'll add a input to make sure it's being passed through. I actually can copy this exact same input because it's the same one. We'll paste it in. Let's make sure that it is being passed. So type of hidden. Perfect. We see the ID right there. I'll just bring it back. And then we don't need to display anything back to the user except for a button or a way for the user to delete. So I'll just add delete for right now. Give this a type of submit, click save. So what should happen is we click the delete button and the task should immediately disappear because there are no tasks, because that task has been removed. So let's just test it to be sure. And we see that the task is no longer there. So we'll check the database, and what we should see is for the second column, or the column named second column new up, there shouldn't be a task. But for the first column, there should be. So let's just test that out or check the database to confirm it. Refresh our DB. We go to columns to see our columns are still there. We'll go to task, and we only see one task now, and this one is new task, and it's assigned to DDF0. To this one, the second one doesn't have anything. So that's perfect. And we have successfully added the ability for columns to have tasks and establish a relationship between columns and tasks by the ID. So I think in the next video, we'll add some additional functionality, maybe bringing in better off using the social provider. And what we'll do is also begin to build out the actual layout of this application. We're just going to look something like a database. I can show you what it looks like. Give me just a moment. It's not a finished product just yet, but it'll kind of give you a idea of the look and what we're going for. I forget the name of the website that I was looking at that I wanted to clone with this project. Thought it was pretty cool and gave an opportunity to add some authentication and some additional features. So we'll call this board flow. I'm going to change the homepage layout to be a little more modern, if you will. But if we click login, we only have Google. So login for right now. It's not working because it's on port 3000. So let me close out this one and we'll start it on port 3000 instead of 3001, which is why it's throwing that error. Close. I'll stop this terminal and start the other one. So this is going to change in just a moment. All right, so I call this board flow. I'm gonna actually give it a home page, and I'm having some issues with my tailwind, but it's okay. You get the point of it. So we'll log in, and I'm using Better Off for authentication, using the social login, and of course it wants to do the multi-factor authentication for security purposes, so that's fine. Give me a second. Let me update my phone app. Sorry, it's coming up now. Internet's moving a little slow here. I'm checking my phone, buddy. All right, here we go. And we're signing in. And this is basically what it'll look like. I know this thing gives security, which is not allowing my tailwind to come through properly, but that's okay. You get the gist of it. We're gonna have a board and we'll have different routes. And here's what it will look like. And eventually I'm gonna add drag and drop, but let me see if I got a better way I can show this. Here's a better look of what the finished product will eventually look like. And I'll close this out. See it better there. So here's what the final, or what this project will eventually evolve to. We have the authentication through Better Off, and you can see them logged in with the JADAD, and we have the log out button where all of our boards will be listed, and we'll have various routes. Right now, this is going to be the home route, and if the user is not logged in, they won't see this sidebar. We'll have the ability to toggle this sidebar just based upon personal preference. Here we have the various routes. The home route will display all boards, and eventually will display tasks that need to be completed. We'll have a calendar view and a settings view. And then with the board flow itself, we'll have the ability to add tasks here, add columns here, update them. And we'll add a little more client-side functionality, but for right now, I kept everything server rendered. So this just kind of gives you an idea of what we will eventually evolve this project to. But as of right now, we have the ability to create columns, create tasks, update and delete. I think in the next video, we'll focus on integrating social authentication with Better Off, and then also begin to build out this layout. So hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, today's stream, feel free to give me a consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.